We thought Vienna, Johann Strauss, so there is no way to escape. And of course, it was not only the music, it was also the concept of having illustrated a very nice piece of a research infrastructure, a very nice piece of research, and a good introduction to the forward-looking plenary session, which will start in about 1 or 2 minutes. And the context is Illustris. I like it very much. This is the simulation of the universe. Of course, not of the whole universe, because in 2014, when this was done, the computing power was not that. It was good, but you know, computing power every year it's more and more. So, and I'm sure there's already a new simulation ongoing. I heard of that, I read of that. But the nice video with the blue Danube walls I found for the Illustris simulation, and I'm very thankful to this team, and they put it on their website. So I thought it's a good idea to use it as an introduction. Welcome back after the coffee to the ICRI, to the second plenary session. My name again is Daniel Weselka. I'm the head of Department for Basic Research and Research Infrastructures, and I'm honored to guide you to the next plenary session. I hope you feel refreshed after the coffee break and that you are now ready for a look into the very far future. Did you enjoy the video? It was a computer simulation, as I told you, together with the music of Johann Strauss. And it was something which I think is part of our future. Simulation is getting more and more important. Data, of course, are more and more important. And even the universe in silico, as you have seen it on the screen, that's just great. Which simulations will be available in 30 years? Will we still celebrate the 19th ICRI, which is in 30 years, 2048? Will we still celebrate this ICRI conference in a conference center? I'm sure that the Hofburg, and I hope, will still exist, but perhaps we are in our special virtual reality rooms and everyone is taking part in a conference, but not only in a virtual reality and not in real. I would say, I don't think, but we will have that in the discussion. You will still, or I will still appreciate it very much to see Paris or the other great, or Beijing it was great, and many other great places in the world. So could be that the ICRI 2048 is still not only in the virtual universe, but in a real conference center. The heading for this afternoon is how do research infrastructures look like in 30 years' time. The rationale for this session is to play around with visions in order to provide us with a creative kickoff for the parallel sessions tomorrow. Tomorrow's session will certainly tackle many aspects of research infrastructure development and policy in a much more concrete and reality-driven way. But today's goal, and the goal of the plenary session now, is a little bit to think out of the box, to go where no one has gone before. This outlook comprises at least 2 components: a visionary, technical or scientific outlook, and a political outlook regarding plans and strategies. We are glad to have an excellent panel of highly renowned speakers with us today who cover different backgrounds and come from very different global regions. Before I continue with the panel, I would first like to introduce my colleague, Catherine Ewart, who will be the rapporteur of this session, which is very important because we want to draw conclusions on Friday. This will be done again by the Director General, Barbara Weidgruber, and the input we collect during the sessions. Catherine Ewart is Associate Director for the area of Stakeholder and International Relations at the Science and Technology Facilities Council in UK, which is part of the UK Research and Innovation. She has a 25 years experience in the UK research system in change leadership, strategy, communications and government affairs roles. In 2014, she was seconded to the Department of Business Innovation and Skills, where she helped to develop our plan for growth, the UK government strategy for science and innovation. With all those skills, she is for sure perfect as a moderator. Now back to the panel. Each of the panel members will give a short presentation on a forward look from their personal view, of course. After that, we will have a panel discussion on some specific aspects. Will robots do all our work or not? And where I also invite you, the audience, for short comments or to ask questions. Some short but very important instruction. I kindly remind the speakers to keep the time, and as I promised, I will do that with this signal. I bought it in Beijing. It's a very nice sound. You know, Vienna is also well known for the Christkindlmarkt and all that, but also in China you have these very nice bells, and so to show the global ICRI, it will be done by Chinese sound. So I will be very tight on the agenda, and this signal comes 1 minute before you should come to an end. With this, let us proceed to the exciting journey of the future, and may I now ask the panelists to the stage. Professor Balega, Professor Gao, Gabriele Figoni, Dr. Fioni, Dr. Varakaul, Professor Börsch-Suppan, Dr. Ferrari, and last but not least, Professor Helmut Dösch. Please. So, there is indicated. Yeah, perfect. Gao, Fioni, Charlotte. Wer ist Charlotte? Ah, da ist Charlotte. Our first speaker, to the audience, I do not see you, you know, on the stage. It's all dark here, but you in the night. The first speaker is Professor Yuri Balega. Yuri Balega is scientific director of the Special Astrophysical Observatory of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and since 2017. Also the Vice President of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Yeah. It's a great honor to have you here. He is a highly renowned scientist in global astronomical community. The main research interest of Professor Balega is in the field of high angular resolution imaging and spectral interferometry. And he is author of more than 300 scientific papers as well as editor-in-chief of the Astrophysical Bulletin. Please, Professor Balega.
Okay, thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, dear colleagues, I would like to express best wishes to all participants of this outstanding meeting on behalf of course, of Russian science community. It's also very warm in Russia. This autumn was probably one of the warmest autumn in the history in our country, but it's nice weather also here. So Russian Academy of Sciences is one of the oldest research and scientific academies in the world. I think that only the French Academy of Sciences is older. Soon we will celebrate 300 years anniversary of Russian Academy of Sciences. And it is also one of the largest communities in the world. 10 years ago, we had about 100,000 researchers and employees in the Russian Academy of Sciences. A few years ago, it was split by the decision of the government. It was split in two parts. The institutions were taken from the academy and fixed to a special federal agency. Now it is the Ministry of Science and Education. And the academy remains as a highest expertise organization with the we have to make expertise of scientific projects, develop science strategy, foreign relations, etc. So I would like to show you on this slide that from the point of view of infrastructure, Russia has this pie, yes, and the largest piece of this pie belongs to nuclear physics and accelerators. You can see, next slide. Where is this? Here, sorry. The mega science projects in Russia, only the principal mega science projects are shown on this slide. So you see also the 4 large projects where we participate, European projects, also in the field of nuclear physics. Also, there are some projects which are in process on the territory of our country, and except one, all of them also connected with nuclear physics. So I think that most of you understand why this tendency was formed in the former years. So, talking about the future of infrastructure in European science, I think we have to use the experience we have already built different research organizations, international centers in Europe. One of these is, of course, European Southern Observatory, which is has 10 decades of experience, CERN experience. So this experience can be used to forecast what will be in future. Because these are very long-lasting projects, and typically from the beginning, from the idea and scientific justification to the first light, to the first experiments, it takes more than 20 or 30 years. So we have to understand that the projects which will be in the middle of the century are discussed now in the Research Society today here. So in other words, what is decided today, this will be the infrastructure of science of Europe and the world science in the end of 40s or in the 50s of this century. So, of course, the very important phase of project discussion, accurate definition of the project. This is a very long-lasting project, and one good example, this is the largest telescope which is under construction now in European Southern Observatory, which will have the mirror diameter 39 meters. In the beginning, this was a project of 100-meter telescope, which was then transformed to a smaller 42, now 39. But from year to year, it became more and more clear how to build this fantastic instrument. So this is a very long phase. We have also to understand that we have to unify and somehow to reapproach the laws in the field of science of different countries. For example, if Russia wants to join some specific projects, international projects, we have to somehow to adapt our laws to these laws which are on these countries. So it's very difficult. Entrance fee could be very high. One of the most expensive projects in space, for example, this is International Space Station. It's the price is over $100 billion. So it's very expensive, and it's very difficult to prove to politicians to spend money for more and more expensive scientific projects. International committees, this is very well known things to those people who work in this field and who already formed different big infrastructure projects. I want just say that The modern world today is not in a very perfect shape from the political point of view. We have a lot of tensions, we have wars on the territory of our planet, and the only force which can overcome and which can break the wall created by politicians is the culture and the science. And therefore the infrastructure in science is extremely important to make our world better. As a final remark, I propose to hold one of the next such meetings on the territory of my country, perhaps in Moscow, because Russian Academy of Science has a very big infrastructure to hold such meetings, and I will be very glad if one day we will meet in our capital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bollega. He was perfect in time, so I could not use my nice bell. Thanks also for your concluding remarks, which are not the big vision for a special, high sophisticated infrastructures, but the vision of cooperation and the vision of art and science, who are very, very important for global development. Thank you very much. As we are now good on time, one question, if there is. Yes, please.
So I was very pleased to hear what you say, and I think that many countries in Europe, if not Europe as a whole, would be extremely interested in joining you with this mega science projects. So there is, this one big question now. We would need, to, subscribe to common codes of conduct, transparent access, peer-reviewed facilities, and so on. Are you going in this direction?
Yes, sure. Of course, I understand the question. For a long time, the Russian community, scientific, was more or less closed. So these infrastructure projects were closed on the borders of Russian territories. Yeah. Now it's opening, and we, as you could see, we are members of many European projects. We pay a lot of money to be members. And the Academy of Science, which is responsible for international relations in science, we are open for any discussion, for any proposals, and to talk about any project.
Thank you very much. Now let's come to the next speaker. It's Professor Hongyun Gao. Professor Hongyun Gao's background is also in physics. He is Deputy Director of the Institute of Physics of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, as well as Director General of the Bureau of Frontier Sciences and Education of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. His research field is in the area of nanoscale electronic devices, organic, inorganic complexes, and low-dimensional biosystems, and testing their properties. Please, Professor Gao, take the floor.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you very much. I think, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for providing me this great opportunity to give the introduction to the Chinese Academy of Sciences, national major scientific and technological infrastructure. I'm representing Professor Chunli Bai, the president of the CAS. Here is the outline of my talk today. So I will give a brief introduction to the CAS, and then talk about the planning of the national SNT infrastructure, and the introduction to the CAS national major SNT infrastructure. So the CAS is a cradle of science and innovation in China. It was founded in November 1st, 1949. So just 1 month after the China liberation. But it was based on the academic Seneca and Beiping Academy. So actually it was founded it founded is in 1928. 28. So the president right now is generation of the presidents. So right now the president is Professor Cheng Libai. He is also working on the nanoscience. So here is the mission, structure, and the strategy of the CAS. So we have the missions, mainly the high caliber talent, scientific excellence, trusted ideas. And the structure is universities, academy, and also institutes. So we have 3 universities, within the CAS, the frame, the platform, and we have about 105 institutes, and we have also deal with academic staff. So the strategy is development strategy to run it with democracy, flourish with openness, and boosted with talent. So here is the second part, the national planning and layout. So you can see the medium and long-term planning is 2012 to 2030 for construction of national major SNT infrastructure was issued in 2013. So the priority was given to 16 projects in the 7 fields for the 12th 5-year plan in China. So this is the period. So you can see it's energy science, material science, earth systems, environmental sciences, particle physics and nuclear physics, space, astroscience, and also engineering, technology science, life science. This is a 7 field. So it's detailed infrastructure. And for the 13th 5-year plan for construction of national major SNT infrastructure was issued in, that's 2 years ago, 2016. Priority was given to 10 projects in 6 fields for the 13th 5-year plan period. So here is energy science, material science, life science, particle physics, nuclear physics, spatial astroscience, engineering and technology science. So detailed infrastructure is also listed here. Then I like to talk about the overview of the CAS infrastructure. So CAS takes a major force in the construction and operation of China's major SNT infrastructure with operation of 2/3. So almost all of the Chinese infrastructure was managed by the CAS. Recently, CAS has built a bunch of major SNT infrastructure covering expanding fields, providing strong support for SNT research, forming a primary trend of cluster development of facilities. So here is some pictures, information of the operating facility of CAS. You can see its locations. These facilities located in different cities in China: Beijing, Shanghai, Hefei, also other main cities. As you can see, we have Beijing Electron Positron Collider second. For example, we have also diabetic reactor neutron experiment, also experimental advanced superconducting tokamak. This is an operating facility and also other in different fields. For facilities under construction of CAS, here are the details. You can see here is a 500-meter the aperture spherical reading telescope. This is fast. It just finished the construction last year, and we have other for example, it's a high energy the photon source test facility, and also other large facilities. So the comprehensive national science centers. So according to the 13th 5-year plan for construction of national major SNT infrastructure, China will build a comprehensive national science center in cities with integrating super resources such as Beijing, Shanghai, Hefei, and then make them corridor for original achievements, platform for basic sciences, and a foundation for cultivating young generation of scientists. So here you can see that's a comprehensive national science center. The centers mainly located in this Shanghai. This Shanghai is a map of Shanghai. This site you can see a large area for the large facilities. It's Beijing, located Beijing Huairou. So here is Hefei, in the city Hefei. So the main three cities for the national science and innovation center. So for international corporations, we cooperate with ITER. So China joined ITER in 2016, and CAS takes positive role in the work of ITER. This is China's participation in signing ITER joint implementation agreement, and we have also joined cooperation with LHC. So this is international cooperation. We also do cooperation with SKA. Also do the cooperation on ALI, the pre-module gravitational waves. You can see here, this is a map. It's a map for gravitational waves. Research. You can see the best area. So here is involved best area. So it's Tibet. Tibet is one of the best. Here is Chile. So it's three sides of the good area for gravitational wave observations. So we do the SNT achievement. This use facilities. We are running. We get some very interesting scientific research results. Use this large facilities. Even for this one, it's fast. Just finished last year. Right now we have already get some very interesting scientific results, discovering and verifying millisecond pulsar with fast. So let me conclude. CAS will continue to develop major scientific and technological infrastructure, strengthen opening and sharing, actively participate in international cooperation, and make a contribution to scientific and technological explorations. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gao, for this very interesting talk and this fascinating outlook in your medium and long-term planning with such a variety of facilities to come. Of course, we have also time now. Thank you for timekeeping, for a question from the panel or two.
I have a question for Director Gao. So with your role of representative of CAS, what are the challenges that you are facing in transnational access? I think transnational access was defined one of the biggest challenges in international research infrastructures. So how is China tackling the access to your national infrastructures by other user communities?
For the first, actually, we for the scientific object, we have formed this international scientific committee. So we discuss the scientific issues. Then we should collaborate with international scientists, working in this field, and use this advantage of this fast, and try to pursue this top high quality scientific work.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Looking at the time, perhaps in the audience, to our two renowned speakers from Russia and from China. Now is the chance. I cannot really see if there's a hand, but here it's better. Anyone else? We have... Okay, very good. You get a microphone. The microphone is coming. Thanks a lot for breaking the ice and challenge us.
Thank you for that. My name is Jennifer Edmond. I'm one of the directors of the Daria ERIC, which is a research infrastructure for the arts and humanities. I feel, listening to your presentations, that we in Europe have extended a few definitions that maybe seems different from where you are. In particular, the definition of science infrastructure. So social and cultural innovation is a large part of what we do, but also infrastructure itself, whereas data is a large part of what we do. Am I seeing a difference in your presentations, or am I just seeing a bias of the frame of looking forward 30 years? Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Actually, I think we should have the same definition of the science and the innovation. So in my talk, maybe it's mainly focused on the scientific issue, also because of the time limit. So I couldn't talk about more about the innovation. So based on this scientific instrument, actually, it should include some its larger facilities infrastructure, also working on the innovation. But I couldn't talk more about that. So even for the basic scientific research, the facilities infrastructure, we can still do some innovation, technological innovation. Thank you.
One world, one vision. So thank you very much, Professor Gao. Then let me come to the next speaker of this plenary panel. That is Dr. Gabriele Fioni, again a physicist, but in this case a nuclear physicist, and here today not as a physicist, but as chair of the OECD Global Science Forum, from which I know him for many, many years. Gabriele Fioni graduated in physics of the Bologna University in Italy. He holds a Doctor of Science of the Ghent University in Belgium, and currently he is Director for International Cooperations, in charge in particular of the ITER project, and Deputy Director General of CEA Tech at the French Atomic and now new Atomic and Alternative Energies Commission. Gabriele, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, I'll wait for the PowerPoint. Perfect. And when I heard about, have a look what happens in the next 30 years, I put to myself a question 30 years ago, could I be able to see what happens today? That is the reason why I try to make a game with you. What happens 30 years ago? What we had 30 years ago? 30 years ago, we had not ESRF. The decision to build ESRF was taken just 30 years ago in 1988. There was only ILL. Today, if you go to Grenoble, you have obviously ESRF, and you have ILL. And the interesting thing is that, take for instance ILL, in 30 years, he increased its efficiency by 2 orders of magnitude. And that is simply working on the material of the neutron guides, on the detector, and on the electronics. That's just to say that even facilities continue in their life and continue improvement. In 1988, at CERN, the lab was not yet commissioned. I'm not speaking about LAC, I'm speaking about lab. That means that 30 years ago, we had no experimental evidence of the existence of the boson of the weak interaction Z and W. We had no petawatt laser. 30 years ago, we had picosecond laser at most of 1 terawatt. We had no free electron laser, but we had the first supercomputers, the Cray 2, with an incredible power at that time, was 2 gigaflop. Okay, about just a factor of 8 lower than what we can do now. 30 years ago, we had a mobile phone, no GSM, not 3G, not whatever we have, just a huge radio phone. And for the most important person amongst us, on the desk you can find a wonderful IBM PC with 500 kilobytes of RAM and 10 megabyte hard disk that you can easily saturate with 2 low-resolution photos of today. We had the modem because we had to communicate, and that is one of the 1988 models, 2 kilobits per second. That means that a very low-resolution picture you can download in about a quarter of an hour. What about internet? Because we had internet for ages, isn't it? And luckily, in 1990, I could not find even the data for 1988. The worldwide traffic of internet per month was of the order of 1 terabyte. That means that was the worldwide traffic was not even enough of what we will need for this conference in 3 days. All those did not exist, even not 20 years ago. Then, what I want to say, 30 years ago, we could not even have this vision. And that has been mainly driven by digital. We have been actor of that. Why we have been actor? Because large-scale infrastructure has strongly contributed to that, indirectly. Okay? Obviously, everybody knows about internet, but we do not have to forget all the study of materials that we have carried out on magnetic properties, electric properties, on new materials that allow us today to have the digital revolution we are living. Let me go quickly. What about 30 years from now? For us at OECD, it's clear the digital revolution is not over. It's just at the beginning. And there are several points that I will briefly look at. One concerns the data of research infrastructure, the role of simulation, the fact that we need to build a network of research infrastructure, and we have to maximize social impact. Concerning data sharing and mining, we are speaking more and more about big data, about artificial intelligence to treat large volume of data. We have to use that for science and for large-scale facilities. That is why we will be asked more and more to put online all our metadata, and that, I'm sure, will help a lot the science, because we will have the possibility to make a comparison that nowadays are impossible amongst different types of experiments that has been made with different techniques in different places and also in different science domains. And that require interoperability of databases. And you have to imagine that in all the global challenges, and the global challenges, you know, is the environment, is the climate warming, is everything that concerns biomedical. All these challenges need more and more interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity. That means that we have to be able to put together data coming from different areas and from different types of infrastructure. Then certainly we need a new skill. And at the conference there is a session on skills for research infrastructure, and in particular for data. And we have to assure the sustainability of data repository. Everybody put the data on the network. What about the sustainability of that, and for how long will be online? The Global Science Forum of OECD that I'm chairing has published 2 reports last December, one on the coordination and support of international research data networks, and the other one on business model of data repositories. And the chairman of the last report, Simon Hodgson, will be one of the speakers of the session that will be dedicated to data for research infrastructure in this conference. But this one is a major point for the future. Another point for the future, for me, is the simulation. We have seen the huge progress in computing capacity that we have. Nowadays, we can go from basic mechanism, and from there, we move to multi-physics simulation, and then we can arrive to a device modeling. You know that nowadays you can get patent without any problem, based only on the simulation. We did that in Grenoble for transistor, and that one will be something that will be more and more used. And for me, what is important in the future for research infrastructure is we need more and more high-resolution dynamics experiments, just to compare and to validate all the simulation we are making. We need more and more smart experiments. Another point that is important is the network of research infrastructure. And there we are speaking mainly about national research infrastructure, which are essential for the full landscape that we have. You cannot have only large international top research infrastructure without having an ecosystem where you have also dedicated national infrastructure. There, I think the laser community has shown the road, have joint common call for proposal, common evaluation procedure, and to have an open access all over Europe. I think that is a way that we have certainly to go more and more, and that, I would say, obviously is saving cost. It's saving cost, but it's sharing intelligence. When you have groups that come from another country, come to make an experiment, they bring with them a knowledge and sometimes piece of technologies. And for that, we have a new project of the Global Science Forum of OECD that is right in that direction, and we will start at the coming forum of GSF that will take place in 1 month from now. Last point that has been already highlighted in the present session is maximize the social impact. We understand, thanks to the digital revolution that we have seen, thanks to the wide participation, let me say, of the public through the social networks, we have to show to our citizens that are the owner, because they are the taxpayer, are the owner of our facility, they have to respond to the global challenges. And therefore, we have really to be careful to explain every time how our facility contribute directly and indirectly to the global challenges of the world. On that, GSF has an ongoing activity on socioeconomic impact that will be presented in a session in this conference, and we had a report on strengthening the effectiveness and the sustainability of research infrastructure. To conclude, when I was young, 2 years ago, at ILL, I was a young scientist. Somebody gave me this phrase for my liveness, and I think it's something that we have to keep in mind. Whenever we do something that is 2 or 3 orders of magnitude better than any existing one, that will bring it to new science. And new science means new frontier, means that if we make such a facility, means that we push the technology up to the very limit. And that will be good for all the society. Thank you very much. I got a bit of time that the other one gave me. Thank you.
Gabriele, thank you very, very much. Maximize the social impact, your last slide. A very important point. I think many new and following fora will focus on that, how to do that. This is really important, is these infrastructures, which are so much fun for the scientists, they are paid by the taxpayers. So we have to look very, very careful, and not only look, we have to give back the taxpayers a lot. Digital revolution will continue was also one of your sentences. Yes, the question is, in which direction, where will it lead us? There is no wall, no end to see of that, of course. I would also ask the panel for one or two questions to the chair of the Global Science Forum, if there is immediately one. Or from the audience. Yes, here in the 5th row, please.
So my name is Michael Ress from Infrafrontier, one of the biomedical research infrastructures. I was wondering about your notion of the networks of research infrastructures on the national level. So how would you compare that to this form of organization of research infrastructure as it is very common in the biomedical field or in the social sciences, the distributed research infrastructures?
Yeah, thank you for the question. From what I know from the social sciences research infrastructure, the main difference that we will have between the two are essentially the cost. The cost of operation and also the cost of investment. The investment of a national research infrastructure is significant. Concerning the procedure to have access, I'm not familiar with the one from the social sciences, but I feel that if, let me say, national research infrastructure will be open internationally, we can only have a big advantage. That is the fact that, first of all, you will get more and more movement of scientists, movement of the intelligence, and let me say a natural specialization of each research infrastructure. We have seen that in the laser, where we had, in some cases, a specialization around the kind of experiment that were built only thanks to the fact that they were hosting people coming from other countries. And that one means that we will have national research infrastructure that will be excellent in a specific domain. And then in that specific domain, they can even compete with large international research infrastructure.
Thank you very much. When I was a student, so many years ago, not centuries, but many years, I had a famous professor in theoretical physics, and in a Christmas lecture, he talked about theoretical physicists' dreams, and he said, oh, the biggest accelerator we can build, this would be just around the Earth. We cannot build it, but this is the biggest one he could imagine. I don't think we will have in 30 years an accelerator around the Earth, and I don't think that that's the right plan to do it. We will have perhaps much other techniques, perhaps not with magnets or whatsoever. And the right person to tell us to have a look in this not so far future, but in the future, is Charlotte. She is the Director for International Relations at CERN. Charlotte holds a Master of Philosophy in International Relations of the University of Cambridge and a Master of Arts of History from the University of Copenhagen, as well as of Sydney. Before joining CERN, Charlotte has held a variety of posts at the United Nations, amongst them Chief of Political Affairs and Partnership Sections of the United Nations Office at Geneva. Please, Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will try also to test the bell and see if that works. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you very much to the organizers for a superb organization. I will, to some extent, my presentation will dovetail very much what we have heard so far, looking at trends and directions in large infrastructures, but from the perspective of CERN and from the perspective of high energy particle physics. And Gabriele just stole a couple of the points on my final slide already, so hopefully that will reduce some of my time. Now, if we look a little bit at the landscape of high energy particle physics today, CERN, as the European Laboratory for Particle Physics, is now moving towards the high luminosity LHC, which is the upgrade of the Large Hadron Collider, a 27-kilometer ring straddling the border of France and Switzerland. This was identified as the highest priority in the 2013 update of the European Strategy for Particle Physics, and at the same time we are preparing for the next generation of accelerator to come after the Large Hadron Collider with R&D and also with dedicated studies. There are 2 studies currently, one on a compact linear collider and one on a future circular collider, which are moving forward, and then eventually decisions will be taken on where we will go after the Large Hadron Collider. But it's a very dynamic and it's a global field. Beyond Europe, there are neutrino programs largely in the US and in Japan. CERN participates via its neutrino platform in this. There are aspirations for an international linear collider in Japan. We're looking forward to a decision from the Japanese, hopefully towards the end of the year. There are also discussions on potentially a large circular collider in China. Very recently, earlier this month, there was a conceptual design report that came out on the China Electron Positron Collider. So this is a very fast-moving field. There's a lot of dynamism and very much a global dimension, which I will come back to in a little bit more detail. If we look ahead, this is a field where there is a very strong tradition for strategizing and doing that in a collective manner. The next update of the European Strategy for Particle Physics will be kicked off later this month at the CERN Council. This is a bottom-up process of setting a roadmap for in the European context, but set very much within a global landscape that sets the priorities for the field for the coming 5 to 7 years. And this is, of course, what's part of the foundation for the next 30 years if we look ahead. This is a process that involves very much the community. It is a bottom-up process led from below, but very much driven by scientific priorities, but very much with an awareness of the financial and also the technical feasibility. We have talked earlier today about the expectations and the importance of the taxpayer, and this element is very much in there. The strategy process then produces a European roadmap in a worldwide context that feeds into and also facilitates global coherent thinking in the field. Physics very much requires a global coordination, given the number, the size, the complexity of the infrastructures. And we have seen an increasing alignment between the European, the Japanese, and the US roadmaps in this area, which is very important, again, to optimize the use of resources. A particular continuing trend, which we have heard a lot about today and which I think we will continue to hear about in the days that come, is the globalization of science. Particle physics is part of that increasingly globalized community. CERN has grown as an organization from 12 member states in 1954 to 22 today. Looking ahead, we might be going towards 25, 26 over the next 5 to 7 years, and this also includes then a number of cooperation agreements with many countries beyond that. But if we look most importantly at the, is this working? Yes. At the plot here that concerns our users. This is a global community of 13,000 users, and these are very, very important. CERN is important as an organization, as an infrastructure, but the science is done in universities and institutes across the world who bring the users to CERN. And there you can see that this is a very much a globalized community. We have up to about 40% of the user community today is from outside of the member states of CERN. This is also an important performance indicator when it comes to the attractiveness of the infrastructure, and you can see very much that this shows that there is a European leadership in this particular field of science in high energy particle physics. Importantly to note that the growth in the reach and the depth of the user community has been complemented also by increasing contributions to the infrastructure. Before the Large Hadron Collider, there was really say no hardware, no in-kind contributions from outside of the member states. With the Large Hadron Collider, about 10% of that has come from non-member states, and for some of the experiments, the fraction is between 10 and 40%. So you're seeing an increasing pooling of resources, not just within member states, but also beyond. Now, if we look ahead at where's particle physics going to go in 30 years, to some extent 30 years is already here. Particle physics is a field where that is inherently long-term. The high luminosity upgrade of the LHC is a 20-year program that is now being implemented. Some of the studies underway project 50 years into the future. But it's very important that this long-range planning goes hand in hand with a reactivity to developments in the field, scientifically, but also in the global context. And it's of course important to maintain diversity in the field. It is not good to have just one leader. You need to have competition from across the board in order to drive the science forward. And sustained support of our member states is of course what has been holding this together for many, many years, and that will continue to be important as we move forward. Now, if we try and extrapolate a little bit from that in terms of how will research infrastructures look in 30 years, what will be the important elements of successful and sustainable infrastructures in 30 years from now? It's clear that evolution will be necessary. We saw that from Gabriele's very good presentation in terms of how much has happened in 30 years. If we project 30 years into the future, it's clear that there will be developments that we need to take into account. We need to be flexible. We need to adapt to the challenges of the time while we maintain scientific diversity and scientific excellence, and very much a global open approach that allows us to do the science. So if we try and unpack that a little bit more, I have identified 6 elements that I think will be very important also in 30 years' time for successful infrastructures. How that will pan out is obviously very difficult to say, but I think regardless of how we look at the landscape in 30 years' time, this will be important. It is important that research selection and also operation models are driven by scientific excellence. I'm looking at the bell. Am I okay? From the bell? It's clear that access models will vary across fields. We've spoken a lot about access models. This is one of the core aspects to discuss during this conference. But it's important to keep in mind that progress is really accelerated in unrestricted collaboration. So you need to have an open model that has an element of balance and also reciprocity. I think we've heard a lot about today the importance of continuously developing and implementing cutting-edge technologies. This is key to many of the research infrastructures, and this is also where we get the significant knowledge transfer to society and the socio-economic impact, which is so important. Very closely linked to that is the training of the future scientists, engineers. That has to remain a core mission. Phil brought up in the previous panel, he brought up the Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously, education goal number 3 is an important one, and one where research infrastructures can make a particular contribution, just as they can on goal 9, which is the goal concerning innovation. We believe that interconnection across research infrastructures will continue, and there will be a stronger network as we go forward. We heard also that in the previous presentations. But it's important that that is driven by the needs of research. Researchers will come together in these connections, in these nodes, as needs arise, depending on the field. And I think very importantly, and something that we very much believe in, is that the research infrastructures must continue to be drivers of open science, of open access publishing, open software, open hardware. This is increasingly something that the public looks at and policymakers look at as well, and it's important that that continues to be one of the cornerstones of our work. So I will stop there. I did not test the bell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I did hear nothing about the next future big machine, the next dream machine, but I know that's a political question and it will be debated for sure in the coming years. And it's also not only a political and the financial question, it's also a science diplomacy question of, as the particle physicists are already real global endeavor, and I'm sure this will continue. So thanks again, Charlotte. Now, 1 or 2 questions. First of all, I look to the panel.
I have a question, Charlotte. You've mentioned at the very end open with reciprocity. What does it mean in practice?
I think that can be developed. There are different models for doing that, but I think it's important that you have a balanced system where something goes both ways. I think you spoke earlier also about access to national infrastructures and international infrastructures, and it's important that there is a way for the international community to also to feed into and be fed into the other way around. And if there is no sense of balance and no sense of reciprocity, that can create an underlying tension which can be problematic.
Charlotte, nice talk. So there are many ideas now on the table. What would be the next facilities, the next way forward? To which extent, the realization of these ideas depend on the outcome of the high luminosity LHC? Is this independent, or do we have to wait for the results of that?
It's very important that whatever comes next is science-driven. The science must show the way. The Hadron Collider continues to bring out results, and you can take your bearings from them, but it is very important that you have the science feed into. It is not a singular political decision, and it's important that it's science-driven.
Yes, please.
Is there any contradiction between the current state, because you have a current state of facilities, yeah, and people work in some areas of physics, yeah, and then there is a future which will be probably in 30 or 50 years from now. So of course it means that you have to put invest money and some efforts to this new future. Is there a contradiction between these two, current state and the future possibilities of CERN?
Is there a contradiction between, for example, the high luminosity LHC and what will come later? I think you will see that the CERN has been built, and the success of CERN and the achievements of CERN have been built over time. So each project feeds into the next. We talk about the accelerator complex at CERN. So there is always one accelerator that leads to the next step. So I don't necessarily see an inherent contradiction in that. I see it rather as a continuum, as part of a scientific explorative journey forwards.
Thanks again, Charlotte. Okay, one more question, Gabriele. But last question, then we come to the next speaker.
Okay, very simple. Can you comment on the technological development that you will need for the new machine? Are you already looking at that? What you see for the future?
Yes, there is. I mentioned very briefly at the beginning that there's a rich R&D program, for example, on high-field magnets. So there's a lot of technology R&D going on at the moment that, regardless of what will come after the Large Hadron Collider, will be important and also will have spin-off opportunities. So yes, that work is ongoing.
I will resist to ask if we will have in some far future a tabletop collider or a tabletop thing. Okay, that's too far in the future. Thanks again, Charlotte. Our fifth speaker, let us move to him, to Professor Axel Börsch-Suppan. He is co-director of the Institute of Social Law and Social Policy of the Max Planck Society in Munich, as well as the managing director of the European Research Infrastructure SHARE ERIC. SHARE stands for Survey on Health, Aging and Retirement in Europe, which gives us a flavor of his main research interests. He has studied economics and mathematics at the University in Munich and Bonn, and holds a PhD in macroeconomics from the MIT in Cambridge. Professor Börsch-Suppan, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. What a great location here, and what a great topic actually for a session to look 30 years in the future. I will put you from CERN and the dominance of physics in the natural sciences to a completely different world, which is the social sciences. And we'll tell you a little bit of the vision which I have about the social sciences and their research infrastructures in the next 30 years and how we get there. the social sciences are actually in a big revolution. They change not only quantitatively by being 5 times as big or 5 as fast, but really qualitatively they are in a process of huge change. That is mainly driven, or I should say, historically this has started with the economists very early on in the 50s, driven by the United States. They started to do theories, to do models, and actually to meet these models with data. This process is going on, and it's definitely a revolution in the natural science, in the social sciences, more and more becoming like the natural sciences. The only big difference is they look at humans rather than gravitational waves or particles. I actually have been brought up, as our chairman said, in the physical science and mathematics, and slowly I became more and more interested in humans as objects of research. Most economists these days, and many sociological people working in sociology, start with mathematics and then go in their fields. That's a revolution. So the questions we are interested in are very human, very close to normal life in some sense, but we use the methods more and more of natural sciences. One question is, if you make a decision, do you procrastinate or not? For example, if you should save for your old age, do you postpone this until it's almost too late? Another question is, when do people retire, later or earlier? Another question, which is very much these days in the newspaper, when do people, say in Africa, decide to migrate to Europe? Or do they stay in their home country? So these are in some sense very simple questions, but very hard to answer, and that's why we need more science and more data. Modern economics, modern sociology uses mathematical models. And just to show you some idea, this is a model about decision-making for retirement. The outcome of it is a difference equation, a little bit like the differential equations in physics, who show how people make decisions on their retirement of their lifetime. If we think about aging, human aging, something which I think interests us a lot as we age ourselves, we get very complicated models. We look at how health changes over the lifetime, how income changes, hopefully up, how social networks change, it's all intermingled with each other. These are important questions. What we are particularly interested in, and where the social value comes from the social sciences, is the policy impact. So we want to know how healthcare interventions actually have changed health. We want to know how social or labor market reforms actually change labor market participation. These are huge numbers which are behind this. If we make the healthcare system 1% more efficient in the European community, we have saved 9 billion euros. Just one little percentage change. So the socioeconomic impact potentially of the social sciences is huge. The other thing, and this will pertain in the future as we move along this revolution. The other revolution in the social sciences is, if I think 30 years of time, is the interlock between biomedical sciences and socioeconomic sciences. The more we understand about cognition, how decision-making is done in our brains, we also know better how to describe economic or social decisions. If we know how, for example, the slow onset of dementia changes decisions in families and in society and spending, we need biomedical research for that. And again, that is one of my visions, that we better put the human sciences of medicine and socioeconomics together. All this obviously needs data. We built from these mathematical models, very complicated models, that part simulation models, as we do in physics. We look, for example, at a pension reform and simulate it before the reform finally goes through the parliament and will be decided upon. Now, the data which social sciences need are surveys. You have to ask people if you study people. You have to look at human beings if you study human beings. So what we do is we collect data, we do field experiments with these people, but especially we look how institutional experiments like a law change, a policy change in one country, which has not happened in another country, has changed the one country relative to the other. And you immediately see that for us, what the physics do, the physicists do in their experiments, we actually rely on policy changes, historical changes, and the European Union gives us this wonderful laboratory of different countries where we see different policies and different people react differently. So for us, very important are international comparisons, and we are grateful for the European Union to actually provide the lab which we have. The 27 countries in our union, which are all very different, have different policies, can compare to each other, and generate a wealth of information for policy in health, in the social sciences, and in economics. Now, surveys we have three great examples of surveys in the S3 world as large research infrastructures. One is the European Social Survey, which looks at expectations, attitudes, beliefs of people all over Europe. We have SHARE, who looks at the aging process, computes objective data, collects blood, but also income of people 50 and over. And we have CESTA, who allows the access to these very complicated data sets. And thanks to the European Union, they cover as much of the European Union as is possible. Surveys are very, very different from physical infrastructures, like telescopes or a collider. One reason that they're very different is we don't charge user fees. Actually, it would be bad to charge user fees. We want to have as many users, and because nobody takes time away from another user for the surveys, we can have as many as we can. And we want to foster the usage of that data. The second great difference is that there is no distinction between this construction and maintenance of these infrastructures. As we collect more data, we construct, but we also improve our data. And that leads me to the third very, very big difference in surveys to, say, telescopes or colliders, which is they don't depreciate. They do exactly the opposite. They are not getting outmoded, but the more data we have of a human person, the more valuable the data gets. If we know a person 10 years, we will learn a lot more in the 11th and the 12th year. So the value of socioeconomic infrastructures actually increases with age, rather than you have to tear it down and build a new one. And I think that should be reflected in the policy, both by the European Commission, DG Research, as well as in the S3 process. Socioeconomic infrastructures are different. They are very long because they look at human aging. You know these stages in age. That's why we want to observe, for example, aging people until they die, from 50 to whatever it is. They're also different because countries, the richness of our culture and the countries in Europe are actually the research objects. So we want to have countries as participants, even if there's not a single researcher, and even if that country is not really funding that research infrastructure, because the country in itself is interesting. Even if Greece has no money to fund expensive surveys, everybody else wants to study how Greece survived after the financial crisis in 2008. Very, very different, again, from physical infrastructures where we want to, well, we have beam time and we give it only to those who can actually pay their user fee. Here we want to do the opposite. Even if they don't pay, we want to have them in. And I really appreciated Jean-David Malot's remark earlier today that it's especially the poorer countries which the European Union has to support to be participant in these surveys and in the development of social sciences towards a more national science approach. Let me conclude and put the notion of European coverage in the center of my conclusion. What we really have as a huge advantage vis-à-vis the United States, our usual competitor, is we have a lot of different countries in Europe. So European coverage is really an essence also from a research point of view. If I look forward to the next 30 years, I'm sure social sciences will even more data and model driven. But for that we need surveys, and we need surveys which cover all of Europe, hopefully all 27.5, maybe again 28 or even more countries. But the variety of countries and the support by the European Union which we get for this variety of countries is really one of the largest assets we have in our continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Börsch-Suppan. Surveys. Thank you very much to let us quick look into your laboratory, which is a really huge one. All this, it's very clear that these surveys you mentioned and many other things in the context are very relevant for policy making. I'm sure there are questions. Please, the first one, Professor Tosch.
Axel, I was extremely thrilled by your equation which determines the decision-making for retirement. So my predecessor refuses to do it. Which parameter is wrong with him? Do we know? But the more serious comment is on your user fees. I mean, I know many infrastructures, actually I know only infrastructures which provide physical instrumentation which actually do not claim user fees either. So because they have a similar aspiration that they want to have the brains and not the money. So I don't know how this is in other places. Of course, the countries who are operating together, the facility contribute, of course, to the operation. So this is somehow an indirect, so to speak, indirect contribution from the various countries to make this facility, open to the users. But I do not know actually any facility in Europe which would claim user fees for getting access.
Well, there are user fees in some telescopes, I know that. But you're completely right. We share the interest in getting brains to our infrastructures. That is definitely common. But not even in theory we could get user fees. Because the access to our data is not exclusive. If somebody uses the data in parallel, 1,000 others can use the data as well. That is fundamentally different.
Thank you very much. I look to the audience. We had a lot of time devoted to the natural sciences, but all of you know, all the other sciences are of equal importance we have to rely on them. There are so many questions, the grand challenges. So we need the cooperation of all the scientific fields. Where do I see a question? Over there, please. It should work. Okay, it should. Please power to this microphone. Oh, we have another microphone. Thank you very much.
If I think about a problem like doing something about our climate, it has a lot of different aspects to it, right? The fundamental law was figured out 100 years ago. There's a lot of simulation of the climate. There's a lot of consequences of the climate that affect agricultural data sets, many other data sets. There are political simulations that determine what actions might be taken. These have reverberations and interactions with economics. So the question that I'm thinking about is, what standard of interoperability do we need between softwares and simulations and data sets so that these sort of multidisciplinary models can actually be put together and made? And how does that interact with sort of the business models for companies that build software and public institutions that build software, et cetera? I wonder if anyone on the panel has comments in that direction.
Yeah, let me actually give you two answers. You may remember that the first question I put up in the beginning was to procrastinate or not. That was not by chance my first question, because climate change shows exactly the right kind of example where we do procrastinate, and we better understand procrastination if we want to solve the climate change problem. It's not that we wouldn't know the mechanisms. It's the procrastination which actually is our big problem. But that is an aside. Let me answer your main question on a very personal way. My son is a marine biologist. So he's interested in diffusion of species in the ocean. He uses the same software and the same kind of differential equations, parabolic differential equations, which I use for the spread, for example, of certain policies in Europe or globally. So the interoperability of the mathematical models and the software is actually almost 100%. Stata, which is the main software we use for analyzing data sets, is written for a generic scientist, not for social sciences. So there's a lot in the models and how to solve these complicated models. The numerical mathematics behind it is 100% interoperable.
Thank you very much. Next on my speakers list is Dr. Tiziana Ferrari. She is Technical Director at the European Grid Initiative Foundation, based in Amsterdam, which coordinates national e-infrastructures in Europe through its partners ICRI. It leads innovation in high-throughput computing, cloud data management and security. Since 2018, Dr. Ferrari is also the project coordinator for European Open Science Cloud, for the European Open Science Cloud Hub. She holds a PhD in electronics and data communications engineering from the Università degli Studi in Bologna. Please, Dr. Ferrari, the floor is yours.
I have a few slides, and I have to say, when I saw the theme of this panel, I thought better to be somewhere else today. It's quite challenging, the future of research infrastructures. It's very hard. But in trying to address this challenge, and of course I bring my background, which is experience with distributed computing, and specifically ICRI, which is a European distributed infrastructure for high-throughput computing and cloud, but partnering with many other cyber infrastructures in the world. I tried to start from the current issues rather than looking at the IT status 30 years ago and how we should try collectively to change how research infrastructures and infrastructures worldwide are organized to improve support to science in the future. And probably, Daniel, 30 years is too far ahead in time, so probably what we can say is where we would like to be, at least with some research infrastructures globally in 10 years. And I've called this the International Data Commons, and I tried to explain this vision, which is of course including a lot of challenges and critical points. So today's scenario is that we are essentially now in the status of having research infrastructures that are building the road system, if you allow me to use this metaphor. So the road system, interconnected roads we have today is somehow comparable with the international data infrastructures and all the standards that allow interoperability of data. I believe the next challenge we have is how to make sense of the data and exchange this data globally, which in practical terms in the metaphor means we now have a very nice interconnected system of bridges and roads internationally, how we make sure that vehicles and business can use the system in a meaningful way, in a way which is impactful for society and for economy. So some of the challenges today are quite major, and one of these is the funding models, the mechanisms of provisioning of the data, and generally speaking of the resources and services that the research infrastructures provide globally. Sometimes we have economical models, sometimes it's a completely free point of views. Some resources cannot be given away for free because they require technical support from experts, allocation of major capacity, which means investments and procurement of the necessary infrastructures ahead in time. There is also a de facto situation, which is research is now operating at constant budgets, and typically what we have seen, at least in Europe, is that in years of economical crisis, investments in IT support are one of the first areas which are being cut. So research infrastructures are always fragile and subject to continuity of funding internationally, and of course also subject to life cycles where they are influenced by the global economical trends worldwide. What we see in major facilities, and I think a lot of speakers have explained, there are major challenges ahead in increasing the amount of data which is being produced or interconnected and exploited. And the challenge is how we're going to do this at constant budget. And one of the major challenges for sure in physics and astronomy and astroparticle physics is how do we do this? How technology is going to evolve so that storage systems, computing systems are going to essentially cost us the same but allow us to deliver more research. And this is a major issue I think European funders have to consider. Another issue is the separation which is, I think, inherited from the late 90s, where we have already legacy research data preservation infrastructures which are well established, have the challenge of data sustainability and curation, and on the other end, other infrastructures for exploitation of the data which are not really engineered or planned to work together. And just to give an example, which is for Europe, but also in the United States, we have computing facilities that typically are not provisioned together with the data that they need to analyze for the end users. And the problem is how, as a scientist, I can retrieve large amounts of data. If I don't have a powerful enough IT infrastructure in my own lab, how can I really get the benefit of the data and find an infrastructure where I can analyze this data? So the future scenario for tomorrow is a possible vision where data becomes infrastructure and public good like a road. And that means being able to really federate the data, not just within research infrastructures, but also across research infrastructure where relevant for science, bringing this together with computing, with the scientific applications, which are typically even sourced by the scientists themselves, and also bring services for open science, for sharing publications, the data, but also the methods, and all of these, all the scientific outputs which are the result of the experiments produced. And how can this be provided and organized internationally in a way which is even more cost-effective? Well, the data commons should, first of all, allow to discover, access, and analyze the data in the future, allowing third-party exploitation. And for the data-driven sciences where exploitation of third-party data is a necessity, this is today a major challenge. If you have to analyze terabytes of data which are owned by different data providers, it's really challenging for the end user to really get hold of this data. All of these have to be provided and procured in a coordinated fashion. So every research infrastructure which is data-bound today is trying to organize these computing and application facilities together with the data. What we see, and this is the experience of ICRI and other partners worldwide, there is a lot of duplication. Many research infrastructures are essentially trying to solve the same problem. How do I bring the data to the computing or vice versa? How do I plan and procure it and maintain it? There is a lot of commonality in these research infrastructures, which would allow cost saving if this common infrastructure for computing, hosting of applications, and data for exploitation could be organized in a horizontal way rather than in silos. So the commons should also allow to access distributed hybrid computing platforms, not just high-performance computing, but high-throughput and also research cloud computing, and essentially should allow to connect the data hubs worldwide, which come together with the applications and all the necessary resources, and the services for publishing the scientific outputs. What does this require in the future? Coordinated co-development, coordinated operations, funding, and procurement across research infrastructure, which is something we don't have today in many cases, especially across different disciplines. We should also make sure that national funding policies change. Today, most of the national infrastructures are for national research communities or for international collaborations identified as a priority. This leaves loosely coupled scientific collaborations alone when they have to access expensive data resources and compute infrastructures. Part of the infrastructures nationally funded should be open by default. And this means as open as possible, allowing cross-community and cross-country sharing and access. This would resolve many issues around business model and recuperation of operational costs. So to conclude, as a vision, this should be a partnership that requires a lot of political will and coordination of research communities, research infrastructures, but also e-infrastructures in Europe and beyond, bringing together the best computing infrastructure, networking services, and data management facilities we have today, together with instruments to facilitate access like federated authentication, authorization, and permanent identifiers. For Europe, this is probably something that is going to be tackled in the European Open Science Cloud initiative. This is, of course, something to be implemented in the future and a challenge for all scientists and research infrastructures in Europe, but also beyond.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your future vision on data management and on partnership. Today, I have in my pocket a small device which is 400 gigabyte, more photos than I can take on one day or 1 week or 1 month or so whatsoever. So in 10 or in 30 years, what will be the capacity, much more than one can have with a video stream whatsoever. So data is not, will for sure be a big challenge, and not only, and therefore the second thing you mentioned, the partnership and the exploitation of all that, that will be also the more the real challenge than only the space for sharing or for having it. One question, only one. Yes, please, Professor Tosh.
Tiziana, this was an excellent talk, and I think everybody supports what you say, so that's extremely important. I think a major difficulty and challenge is to bring data from different disciplines together. Of course, it's extremely interesting if you have, so to speak, air pollution data, and you map it onto cancer data, that you see, the interrelation between these two phenomena, and I think this would create new knowledge. But so there is this metadata, so you have to, one should then do more research on the metadata issue, right, that you can compare this type of data with each other. Is this a challenge you are having on your agenda?
I have to say this aspect of data interoperability, especially at the level of metadata, was not addressed in these few ideas and slides I presented. So there is a huge amount of funding and efforts in research infrastructures in doing this. And of course, you raise a very important question: what is the level of cross-disciplinary interoperability that should be achieved? I think everybody agrees interoperability per se is a non-goal, is not needed, but needed in the disciplines which have specific needs. So that's needed, and it's essentially part of the construction of this road system, and I built on top of that. But I hope ICRI in Europe and also other research organizations are already tackling this as one of the main points in their agenda.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, let me now introduce Professor Helmut Tosch, who is the chairman of the board of directors of the German Electron Synchrotron Research Center, DESI, at the Helmholtz Association, and full professor at the University Hamburg. Before joining DESI, the solid-state physicist Helmut Tosch was director of the Max Planck Institute for Metal Research in Stuttgart. His particular research interest is in the field of solid interfaces and nanomaterials using synchrotron radiation. Since 2013, Professor Tosch serves also as vice president of the Helmholtz Association. Please, Professor Tosch, we are looking forward to your outlook into the future of research infrastructures.
Thank you, Daniel. So when Daniel invited me to have this forward look, what the X-ray facilities should do, I also found out that this 30 years is a difficult one. But he also provided me with 8 other questions, what we should deal with, how this infrastructure should work in the future, what are the priority areas, to work on. And interestingly, the X-ray, also the synchrotron radiation facilities and the X-ray laser facilities have actually asked this question. So typically 3 years ago, when all these facilities met once, you see the 16 ones here, 2.5 years ago, asking exactly this question: what is the way forward? Which challenges do we have of us, and how do we cope with it? And the outcome of that is what I will tell you a little bit, and this also, I think, guides us a little bit into the future. 20 years maybe there is a glimpse how this could look like in 30 years. Our answer was, we have to devise a completely new type of cooperation between all these national villages we have. Every village is excellent by itself. And by this, devise really a transformative new level of cooperation to cope with the challenges in Europe. So I'm talking about these 2 types of facilities, the circular ones, storage rings, and the new type of facilities, these free electron lasers, which are now currently mushrooming everywhere, also in China, or as we just heard. This is a very, very exciting development. So These 16 villages, they know each other well, so they are not aliens coming together, but well established people working together in various configurations in the past. So they are serving a community of around about 25 researchers. Tendency is increasing and providing really conditions which enable scientific excellence. You see on the right-hand side some numbers which should give you a flavor about the impact and the excellence of the science. Has been possible because these facilities have been pushing technology in the last decades, always beyond that level which was technically possible at the time. And to impress you, just you see on the right-hand side, a diagram which compares, the figure of merit of these facilities, namely the peak, the beam brilliance, to another very ambitious roadmap, namely the one in microelectronics. And you see that, the technology of the X-rays outruns the microelectronics roadmap by many orders of magnitude. So when we were working together 2 years or 2.5 years ago and really discussing what challenges we have ahead of us and how do we possibly cope with it, we defined this era of complexity, where we see that the future in all these grand challenges require novel materials with multifunctional properties which create energies are environmentally benign and so on. So if you think about it, you immediately find out that the analytical challenges in order really to devise materials made to measure, even so at the final stage, atom per atom, with a result where single electrons and spins count at the end. Really need a completely revolutionary new analytical technology, which we have now to impose on the already existing facilities and on the upcoming free electron lasers. So this is a big challenge, and our conclusion was this is surpassing the capability of individual villages. We must work together in a very smart way. In addition, we found out that by doing this, we have also to see how we can create a sustainable research infrastructure ecosystem, by providing on the one hand side these advanced technologies, but also contribute to the next generation of scientists, mobility training of future managers. We need people to run the show in in 10 years, 20 years from now. So this needs high-level managers, but the data challenge has just been mentioned. And if only the data challenges would be on this slide, this would already have justified the cooperation between us. So the way forward is, by now devising, smart facility roadmaps and smart, enabling technology roadmaps. You see this on the left-hand side for next-generation detectors, optics, data management systems, next-generation accelerators. This could be this forward look 30 years from now, which is really interesting but really unclear. And it's on the yellow box here, you see the business plan. So everything is extremely complex, challenging and costly. If everybody needs it, if we are joining forces between the villages, but also between national efforts and European efforts, it's a very good business plan. This is a very simple mathematics. But we do this road mapping, with three principles. The one is coordination, the other one is specialization, that we are, on the coordination level, assure availability of state-of-the-art technologies for academia and industry, provide better standardization in access, data formats, and also, and experimental environments. integrate industry into the exercise, but also integrate new emerging communities and strategic partner to this exercise. Specialization is important because this also saves money and creates excellence. That we are devising a structure where we implement complementary solutions, that everybody does everything, particularly for very expensive high-end applications, and then create specialized consortia for all this type of technology developments you can see, but also for training, education, outreach, and mobility programs. The third one is integration. This could also lead a little bit beyond 20 years. So our vision is that we are creating this consortium, this European organization, also as a docking station for global infrastructure. These are global landscapes of infrastructure, and you see on the left-hand side these areas which we have in our radar. The Eastern Europe, we are talking to the Russian Federation. I'm glad that a high delegation of Russia is here, but also with Asia we're in contact. Sesame has just yesterday submitted the application to become an associate member, which we actually will treat extremely positively, but we have also been at ICRI 2 years from now, where we have been talking to South African people. We have contact to the DOE labs and to South America on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we need these partners for technology developments, and you see this type of partnerships. If you want to do it, you need a robust organization which can make decisions, which works transparent, which is effective and open. And I don't go into the details, but I just want to show you that this is all implemented. It's already fully operational. And as we speak, actually, people are working here in the various working groups and so on. So the next step is that we try now to make mission support for Horizon Europe. And as you know, they are working on these 3 pillars, and we analyzed, so to speak, what we have in mind, how we support these various pillars by these facility roadmaps, by competence programs where we integrate 25,000 researchers in coping with the grand challenges, and on the innovation pillar by the technology roadmap by integrating European industry. So in doing that, our proposal is for the Horizon Europe that this could become a new European partnership where we are operating a program for Europe in technology development. So this would require that we are creating outside the consortium a project agency which actually operates the whole show. So we have to make commercials for that. Now this is the forward look, so a new vision for Europe. So this, I think, is an interesting model, and we have to see in the next years how well this works. So this is, we are new, so we are working together. I can say that the optimism between the laboratories is very interesting, not only between the managers, but also between the people who are working in the laboratories. So boosting science and innovation in Europe, robust roadmaps for the first time, for this type of science, but also interesting that there is one voice which can be called, so who do you call if you want to talk to European X-ray facilities? The famous question from US. Now there is this voice. So new ways of cooperation with industry, expertise sharing, and science diplomacy, now integrating LPCs, but also, so to speak, neighboring European partners into this whole exercise. And I feel the breath of Daniel in my face. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's not easy to keep time, but we are good in time, and we have a third panel, a short one, and then the Viennese surprise, and still everything is good in time. So, thank you very much, Professor Tosch. One question, of course, is also here possible. Is it from the panel? No? From the audience? I do not see one. And I want to say, oh, Gabriele, please.
Yeah, because it's a very, very nice initiative, the fact of putting all of these facilities together. What about the common technological development that you foreseen for them?
So, I mean, this was, maybe it was a little bit quick. So this is, of course, now new that, we are not only developing the upgrades of the facilities, but we are also developing technology roadmaps which are necessary to make this, to leverage the potential of these facilities. So we have working groups. If one could see the organization, you could see that we have working groups developing roadmaps for new detectors, new type of optics. Now this will be worked out. These are expensive things. What we are working on is that we get an agreement between the national funding bodies and the European Commission to really put this funding together, which is a good business plan. If one facility somewhere wants to do this alone, it's very ambitious. Usually, the expertise is not sufficient, and it's extremely costly locally. So if one would do that together between the facilities, but also in a sharing mode between the national funding bodies and the European Commission, this would be really an interesting new way of getting these technologies going. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. There were so many questions answered and more not answered, but that's not a criticism, that's the chance to post them in the tomorrow 4 parallel sessions and in future ICRI conferences. There was, for example, the question, will all research be done in silico in the future, or do we just need research infrastructures as very big computer facilities? Is robotics, artificial intelligence, I did not hear. I'm really wondering, machine intelligence, is that a threat for human researchers or an invaluable asset? How could we provide for a balanced distribution and fair and seamless access to research infrastructures globally? This is the ICRI. We are not just for Europe. It's the Global Infrastructure Conference. Europe is very proud of the S3 roadmap. Will there be a global strategy for research infrastructures? I think we should talk about that. There are fora where this very important and also more political questions will have to be discussed, and I'm sure will be discussed. And some of these interesting questions will also be discussed in the coming sessions. With this, I would like to conclude the plenary session 2. I kindly thank the panel members for their visionary and highly valuable contributions to the session. It's great to have you here. I just want to have you for a family photo in front of the stage. And to the audience, please join me before the photo in giving them a big hand for their session. So, I see the photographer, so please come here in front.
Probably you in the center.
No. I have a good look from here, so I can see all of you. Okay, one more and then it's... Okay, thank you very much. Thanks again. Last but not least, let me introduce 2 very distinguished panelists here for the 3rd panel. It's Rojan O'Reilly-Runte from Canada and John Walmsley, UK still, yeah? Yeah, UK, of course. Dr. Rosan is the 5th president and CEO of the Canadian... No, we have that time. The surprise is still waiting and we have the surprise. It's everything okay. is the CEO of the Canadian Foundation for Innovation. Dr. Runti has previously served as President and Vice Chancellor of Charlton University, President of University St. Anne, Principal of Glendon College, and so on and so forth. She graduated summa cum laude in French with State University and served on numerous boards, and we are very glad that we have you here today. And John Wormsley, I have not to introduce him, I know him for so many years, but of course you are also introduced. Professor John Wormsley is Director General of the European Spallation Source. A great job to do. We are looking forward to 1924, I think.
2023.
So even one year earlier, very good. A European Intergovernmental Laboratory under construction in Lund, in Sweden, that will start. Before moving to ESS, he held the position of Chief Executive in the Science and Technology Facilities Council, the well-known STFC in the United Kingdom. They will give us a special plenary session, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Roseanne.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for hanging in there for so long just for this special opportunity to hear John. We are here to introduce the themes of the coming sessions. We're going to do it very briefly, but then you're going to be able to decide tonight that most difficult, troubling decision that will keep you up all night long. Which sessions will I attend? John.
Okay. So first of all, we make a promise to do our very best to get you to the Viennese surprise on time. So this is going to be a light speed tour of the program tomorrow. But first, I'd just like to make a few sort of grounding remarks about the challenges that the parallel sessions are trying to address. We've started this afternoon with a lot of discussion of research infrastructures, perhaps without clearly enunciating enough what we mean by research infrastructures, and there were some comments from certain people who felt that their areas of research needed to be included, and I think that's always been the intention. So when I think about a research infrastructure, it is any national or international scale investment in a research capability, whether it's physical or distributed, whether it's data or collection, as long as it goes beyond what any single institution or nation can support. The goal is to dramatically increase our scientific reach. It is to address research questions of long duration that require pooling of our effort. And as a side effect of this kind of concentration of resources, we can promote collaboration, we can promote interdisciplinarity, and we can achieve greater interaction with industry. And just to emphasize that last point, if you map out the research endeavor, one can think of the different motivations for research: pure science, science as culture, science driven by publications as Nobel and Nobel Prizes, and perhaps at the opposite extreme is something more like profit-driven, industrially motivated. Societal challenges perhaps fit down there because there is a question that you are seeking to address rather than purely following curiosity. And on the other axis, you can look at individual research, bottom-up research, laboratory responsive research, whereas on the other right-hand side here, we've got large teams, top-down problem-solving and strategic. And university-led research typically inhabits the top left quadrant here, whereas our friends in industry are working in the bottom right-hand quadrant, where they're addressing big questions in large teams. And one of the roles of research infrastructures is to span some of the space in between, because research infrastructures can address questions of pure scientific intent, such as those we heard Charlotte talk about at CERN, but they require large pooled efforts which are closer to the industrial scale production of equipment. Or they can address questions of large-scale importance, such as climate, which require pooling of effort between thousands of individual researchers and pooling of data sets at the global scale. So I think research infrastructures are not just large toolkits, they occupy a distinctive place in a research ecosystem, and they need to be supported because of this unique capability to connect individual researchers with big questions and with industrial impact. It's also interesting, I think, historically, to identify 3 waves of investment in research infrastructures globally, starting with the first areas that required that kind of pooled resource in nuclear physics and particle physics. And so CERN as a great example of that. A second wave then, where national laboratory capabilities were directed towards questions more like those that Helmut Dosch was just describing, material science and structural biology, using particle accelerators and using some of the capabilities that had been invented, such as the photon sources, JPARC in Japan, and ESS, my own facility. And the third wave, which we've heard represented by Axel Borsch-Supan and others today, is the infrastructure as data and data as infrastructure. Surveys, climate data, bioinformatics, social sciences, and increasingly these areas federate national research capabilities and national research infrastructures into something global and more reaching. Today, over the next few days, we're talking about all of these. They share many common challenges, big data being one of them, but they come from different backgrounds and they have a different level of comfort with their ways of working. And I think there's something to be learned from the first wave in the third wave and from the third wave in the first wave. Some of the challenges then that we will try to address over the next 2 days: coherent strategies for investment, prioritization, we heard about that already this afternoon, maintaining and ensuring the highest scientific quality, ensuring the socio-economic impact and relevance of the research that we do, the sustainable operation of not just individual research infrastructures, but the whole ecosystem in which they exist, and management of and access to data. So moving on to the first such session then, Roseanne?
So the first session deals with internationalization, major science infrastructures which have grown, not just over the last 30 years, but since the Middle Ages, in respect to vision and goals, the capacity of extraordinary researchers around the world. But they've also grown in terms of physical magnitude, location, and cost. Whether the focus is micro or macro, whether the research is done in an enormous collider, a space station, under the earth, under the sea, all of the projects come with significant price tags. Many surpass the capacity of individual nations, and this is a change. 30 years ago, we talked about the capacity of individual institutions. Now we're talking about whole countries that can't support alone. We need to work together globally. We need to collaborate. Researchers are more than ever willing to work together. Science and scientific research may indeed be the place where international dialogue occurs, despite cultural, social, political, or economic differences in the world. And yet we face challenges. How do we replace me by us? This is not a race for one nation to be first, or one nation to even lead. It's time for us all to be part of a team. How can we achieve this? We talk about it. How can we do it? How can we consciously avoid duplication? Within a single field, can we divide responsibilities and aim for specializations that will come together? Can we focus on solving global issues involving many disciplines that come together? Can convergence be not only a means, but a part of our vision? How do we balance open access and privacy, necessary regulations, and the bureaucracy that enables us but buries initiative? How do we provide the space, time, and environment, and the desire to collaborate? What mechanisms can we create that will stimulate collaboration? We've seen agreements, sharing, communication, funding. What's next? I open the floor tomorrow to you to suggest new challenges, new ideas, and questions. Theme number 2.
Theme number 2 is the importance of human resources in the development and use of research infrastructures. Because these are pooled efforts and because they are large long-term commitments, they require a broader set of skills than individual PI-led research in an academic environment. Not just, or not even mainly, scientific skills. And they're not all typical of the skills that academics have been selected for during our careers. Technology, engineering, computing, project management, people management, communications, financial, HR. So all of these things need to be brought together, and they need to be a team culture needs to be established in the research infrastructure in order to work effectively together. So this session will focus on identifying gaps in human resource capabilities, in training, in skills development, possibilities to pool resources in new ways. And I am told by the organizers of this session that they will make a concrete proposal for ways in which a Europe-wide training scheme could be set up and funded in order to address some of the needs of meeting the requirements of current and future research infrastructure. So that should be interesting, not least for me, because routinely a significant fraction of my time as the manager of research infrastructure is spent dealing with the challenges and opportunities of appropriately staffing and skilling the research project that we're building.
And the third theme deals with diversity and overcoming inequality. We all accept that diversity is important. It is not just something that is important because we should do this morally, but it is important because the new innovation, the new ideas, the new ways to solve the problems of the world will come when we include everyone in the search for solutions. This is not an easy thing to do. Countries are different, economies are vary, populations, size of populations, concerns of nations and their ability at this point in history to work together is difficult. And yet, if we can propose that we're going to discover the solution to certain problems on Earth, we must start with this problem and include everyone in the search for the solution.
Session 4 is focused on enhancing the societal value of research infrastructures. And I think all of us who've been involved in the management of existing facilities or projects, and certainly those of us who've been involved in proposing new ones or arguing for funding at the government level, we all increasingly understand the need to couch our arguments in terms that finance ministries and skeptical media and members of the public can understand. We better understand the need to demonstrate, communicate, and measure the economic and societal impacts of these large investments, but we don't always know exactly how best to do so, and we don't always entirely trust what might be done with the data that we produce. For example, I think many of us would be a little bit scared if there was too simplistic a prioritization of investments based purely on demonstrated or perceived economic impact. But we need to get good at this game because this is what governments are increasingly expecting us to do, and because we have spent decades arguing correctly that investment in large research projects like this does deliver important social and economic impact. So the language that we need to learn is sort of outlined here. We produce outputs from our research. Those outputs have beneficial outcomes. They change something. So a new science paper may produce a new industrial process, and that industrial process may lead to, let's say, improved health outcomes or more jobs or reduced energy consumption, reduced CO2 usage. We don't have to phrase everything in dollar or euro terms, but we do need to address things that are felt to be important. Training of the next generation, interesting young people in science are perfectly acceptable ways to measure our impact. And there is no reason why using this language should favor research which appears to be applied over research which appears to be pure. We just need to find ways that we can explain the value of everything that we do, and frankly, if we don't understand the value of everything that we do, we shouldn't be doing it ourselves. So I think this is 90% a communication challenge, and maybe 10% a question of agreeing among ourselves the appropriate things to measure and making sure that we're all doing it in a compatible way. And at the end of the day, we may want to sit back and think, are there things that we could do in the design of our projects which through a small tweaking can achieve greater impact in these ways? Typically, that's not something we are comfortable to think about. We design our projects from a purely scientific perspective and then estimate the benefits that they will have. But having set up that chain, one could then ask, is there something different about the way we work? Involving other partners, for example, or setting up a dedicated educational work package as part of our project. If we did those things in the design phase, they would increase the impact, and that's what we need to be thinking about. So that is how this session, I hope, will lead, standardizing the sort of data collection and approach that we need, and then helping us think about ways in which we can optimize and not just simply measure the impact that we are having. And finally, session 5.
Research infrastructures on data. This session actually captures the essence of what everyone discusses in all of the sessions, because it's about policy and it's about the technology. And right now, the largest research data, the number of data, the amount of data is bigger and bigger because the projects are bigger. And how can we store it? How can we catalog it? And I think that problem will be solved. Just a few weeks ago at the University of Calgary, they made a chip that's smaller than a euro that holds 10,000 times what the chip held, that the gentleman held in his hand earlier today. We will find a way to store it. We will think about the cloud, and we'll think about what's beyond the cloud. But the other part of it is, how do we get researchers from one different discipline storing data to be able to store it in such a way that it's valuable to researchers in another discipline? How do we manage to deal with international regulations and with privacy concerns for medical research? How do we manage to make the data extremely useful and efficient? Because if it is extremely useful and efficient, we can then create that community of scientists that around the world work together happily and successfully to solve some of the problems that we face. Thank you very much. I think we made it in time for the surprise.
Yeah. So, like the pilot who promises to do his best to get you to the scheduled destination on time despite the delays.
Yes, we'll now deplane.
I think we have landed you at our destination in time for a Vienna surprise.
Here you go, sir.
Daniel.
Schnell Auftrittsapplaus. Sie wird abgestimmt gehen oder
Please, here. I need. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for the technique. That's also a good moment to thank our technicians who provide us with all the power for the micros, for the beamer and all the Internet Streaming. Ich würde Sie jetzt bitten, dieses Internet Streaming zu stoppen. I thank again. Yes, thanks to Roseanne and John. And before this ends the official program, but please be seated. Don't stand up. I have some more to add here. This ends the official program, and that's a good occasion where I can thank the program committee. I saw when I was sitting there some of the members of the program committee from the European Commission sitting in the first row. If there are any other members, I guess they are here from the program committee, please stand up. The program you had today, we invented it, and it was part of the work of the Commission here. Thank you very, very much. It is, I knew it is a lot of work to make such a conference, but I was not aware how much work it really is. And we had nine conferences on the program and a lot of very good and constructive talks. So thanks to everyone who participated and helped us to make this happen and to have a hopefully interesting program. The next point before I leave you to the Viennese surprise that awaits you in this room, some housekeeping rules for today and tomorrow. This I was just provided by my team.